presentation, which is going to be about you drawing your own permission wheel. So it will be great if you actually have pen and paper handy. If you have it right now, great. Otherwise, when we break for that exercise, you'll get a minute to go and grab some pen and paper. And yeah, Abhijit, it would be great if we can get to that exercise within about 45 minutes. So if you can help me manage time, that would be great. Yeah. All right. Is there anything else that I wanted to say? No. So the other thing is, if you do have questions while you are watching the presentation, I may use some terms that you don't understand. You might be curious. I invite you to write down your questions in the chat, and Nisha will be at relevant intervals reading them out. So we will be able to interact and answer those questions as well. So that's it. Enjoy, have fun, and yeah, we can get going. Awesome. So Abhijit, you can maybe run the slides for me. Okay. Is everyone able to see it?
Yeah.
Okay, lovely. Great. Yeah, so it makes sense to start with the concept of permissions. And this was actually introduced by Eric Berne, and I've referred to the book, his 1972 writing, his latest book before he passed away, What Do You Say After You Say Hello, where he describes the 3 Ps, which he considers very critical for a TA therapist, which is potency, the power to confront the parent in the client, permission itself, where it's about really hooking the adult in the client about the need and giving permission. So he thought of it as a parent to child transaction, the therapist as the parent and the child of the client. It could be a positive or a negative permission to do something or to stop doing something. And he considered both potency and protection to be very important in order for a permission to really be able to land. Because the assumption was that if a permission about something is given, then the parent in the client will actually get inflamed or angry. And the child of the client will need protection. And hence the therapist's protection is considered important. So here's an example of giving a permission that he quotes in the book. So the therapist says, so you need permission to stop drinking. That's hooking the adult in the client. The client replies, yes, supposedly from his adult. The therapist then says, right, so stop drinking. So this is a parent-to-child transaction. And the client then says, well, what shall I do when I get all tensed up? It's a child request, a scared child. And the therapist responds, telephone me. That's the adult transaction. So before we proceed, here is where I actually would like to hear what is the group's reaction to this? What do you think? What were your thoughts and feelings as you saw that? Arpita, go ahead, speak.
So I found the reaction of the therapist very spontaneous when he said, telephone me, because it could be a very, if you don't know what to say after this, you may be caught up. But I think the therapists do become smart. So,
right. Okay. You found that spontaneous. Great.
yeah.
Thank you. Chantel?
Hi, apologies, can't put the camera on. I found that the permission, giving permission and taking permission, I wanted the client to take permission rather than be enabled, and that seemed like like he was being enabled or she was being enabled rather than empowered.
Are you saying, Chantel, that you would have loved to see a more proactive role of the client rather than it being given to the client like that?
Yeah, a more proactive role so that the adult is cathected rather than the child being accommodated.
Right. Very interesting perspective. Thank you. Poonam?
I think what stood out for me is the potency of the therapist or the confidence with which the therapist engaged. Yeah, I think that also made a difference. I'm able to relate that the potency and protection is what lets the permission land. So if the tone was different, possibly it have landed. That's what I'm picking up.
Got it. I suggest we just take one or two more. I see Shivani and Manimaran. Maybe we can just do those two.
I kind of resonate with what Chantal said. And what I was really thinking about was whether there was a possibility of soothing the child, because somewhere it took away the power of the child. And I felt that, I was wondering whether it enhances dependency.
Yeah.
That did come up for me.
Great. Thanks, Shivani. One last one, Manimaran. Manimaran, you're going to unmute? Yeah.
We're not able to hear you, Manimaran, if you're speaking.
Maybe you can put your comment in chat. Yeah. Okay. So we can go back to the slide, Abhijit. Yeah, thank you. So actually, those were great contributions, and I noticed the theme, and I felt the same when I actually revisited this concept, which is that while there is definitely a lot of potency and protection and confidence in the therapist, as Poonam said, it is a very parental role, and there is the possibility of infantilizing the child, infantilizing the client, and treating them like a child. And I then got curious and started to look at more articles on Taj to see what is the latest writing on permissions. And I actually found surprisingly little has been written about such a beautiful and liberating concept. But one article I really liked and I highly encourage everyone to read is one by Keith Tudor. It's on the 3 Ps revisited. So he writes about protection, potency, and permission revisited. And he gives a much more contemporary view. And the only thing from that article which I want to highlight here is that he talks about how permission is not really about a specific transaction given, it's not given from the therapist explicitly to the client, but it's actually about the relationship itself, a permissive and liberating atmosphere in a relationship where the client feels free to be themselves, to feel accepted for whoever they are at any given moment. And that is then what causes a lot of permissions to spring up as relevant for that person. So this view on parental permission from the therapist is quite questionable in today's day and age. So I highly encourage contemporary reading around it. So we can move on to the next slide.
Yes. So Manimaran's question is, what is inflamed parent?
Okay, great. Thank you, Manimaran. It basically means that when the client is encouraged to try something new and their child is being provided encouragement, there is a possibility that within their own psyche, the parent ego state gets angry and in a way may try to criticize or attack the client for this attempted experiment or new behavior. And hence, it is recommended that the therapist also provide an atmosphere of protection, which will help the client actually take in the permission and still feel safe. I hope that clarifies. Yeah, thank you for that. I also, yes, encourage, in case there is some term you don't understand, please do put it in the chat. Yeah. Okay. So now we can move to the permission wheel, and this is a really beautiful tool. I find it a pity that not enough people seem to know about it or use it. I learned about it very early when I was in training. In fact, it was about 2 months into training where I presented in our training group about this concept. And then I got the encouragement from my trainer to write an article for Sajta. This is my opportunity to plug to you all the benefits of writing for a journal like Sajta. I think I really gained a very deep understanding of a lot of things and a lot of confidence and potency in my own ability to absorb TA and to express myself using TA terms. So it was very early in 2020 that I chanced upon this. I think someone needs to be muted. Thank you. So it was very early in 2020 that I chanced upon this concept. And the permission wheel was originally created by somebody whose name I will not attempt to pronounce. If anyone knows French here, please tell me, but I'll otherwise give it a go with my French accent. César Rouy in the 1980s created the permission wheel. And it's a really elegant way of representing the main limits of a person's life script. And in the next slide, you're going to see what it looks like. I learned about the permission wheel from a Taj article by Laurie Hawkes, which was written in 2007. It's another highly recommended reading. It's a very beautiful article, very simple, using a case study that makes it very clear. I hope to also show you that today and make the concept clear. The two things that really stand out in the idea of the permission wheel is, first of all, it is a focus on the positives rather than on pathology or negatives. It's a focus on permissions rather than injunctions. So it's inherently strength-based. The second thing about it is that it doesn't encourage thinking in absolutes. So when you see the wheel, you'll realize that inherently it's about relativity. So you can have a low permission for joy, for example, versus no permission at all. So we can move to the next slide where you'll actually see the wheel. And we'll be pausing on the next slide after this, so you'll have an opportunity to react. But here is what it looks like. So the wheel is basically divided into 4 quadrants. Okay, so as you can see on the top right, it's me and my feelings. And it's got joy, anger, fear, and sadness, which are the 4 basic emotions. Then we have on the bottom right, me and the world. So what is my permission to succeed, to think, to know, and to grow up, right? Then left bottom is me and others. What is my permission to be a child, to be close to others, to belong to a group, and to trust others, yeah? And finally, me and myself on the top left, which is about my permission for pleasure, my permission to be myself. Myself is, interestingly, you'll see, divided into, there's one part which is about being myself, the other is about gender, which is what is my permission to be a woman or a man or whatever my chosen gender identity is. And then we have the permission to be healthy, and of course the very important permission to exist, right? So we can move to the next slide, Abhijit, because that will also make it clear. This is again from Laurie Hawkes' article on the permission wheel. And this is a client called Marie, and this is her permission wheel. So what's interesting about this wheel is that it shows that what Marie's permissions, the dark areas, were before she started therapy. And you'll see that there's also shading in lighter color. That represents post-therapy, what was the increase in her permissions, right? So this is a very quick and intuitive co-created tool, which is meant to be done as an exercise with our clients. And before we move on and before you get to try it on your own, I want to pause here and I want you to react to the tool itself. What do you notice? What becomes clear to you? Just look at this wheel and share what your thoughts are. So we can keep this on the screen, Abhijit, and hopefully we'll still be able to see raised hands. So go ahead and share what your first thoughts and reactions and feelings are when you look at this. Shivani?
So I think it's an amazing way in which one can set relative goals for self and then track where I am, for a person who's wanting to be introspective and, for a therapist and client to do it together.
Yeah.
In fact, when I was writing my SATA answers, a way of looking at where I am, and I used it in one of them, was exactly to use this wheel. So I think it's a good way of tracking where you are.
Yeah, yeah.
And it does cover a lot of dimensions.
That's
I think
great.
that helps. That framework helps.
Yeah, that's great. So it is actually very useful in terms of goal setting, tracking where you are. And like you said, it's quite holistic because it covers so many different areas. Yeah. Thanks. Shibani?
Yes, thanks, Yash. So when I'm looking at the wheel, what I'm seeing is that there are a lot of lighter parts which have come, which is in the sphere of me and others. So belonging has increased, closeness has increased. Also, the thinking part is higher now. So I love all of that, that it's showing progress, it's showing growth for the client. And joy is also like increasing, which is me and my feelings. Joy and some permission for anger is what I can see here.
Yeah, that's right. And you're reminding me to mention that actually here in me and others, the permissions to be close, to be a child, belong, etc., those were quite low in the original wheel. The original permissions were quite low. So a lot of improvement has actually come as a result of the therapeutic work in those areas. But what is advised by the creators of the wheel and Laurie Hawkes is you don't necessarily start with the lowest areas. Because those are actually perhaps the toughest to work on. So even if they are very important, it may be that we already work on a client's strong areas and increase those further before they are ready to work on their smallest permission areas. So yeah, thank you for that, Shivani.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Sorry, Yash, I'm struggling to raise my hand digitally, but you know what? Taking your point forward, it accounts for the permissions that I already enjoy. So even at the outset, start of the therapy, when we draw then this feel, quite likely the person is suffering and is looking at what's lacking in the person. When actually it brings out what's already in place for the person and how he's using to carry himself. So it just takes away the focus only from injunction-oriented dialogues to more permission-oriented, and accounts for that as well.
Yeah, for what I already have, which I can build on. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Abhijit. We'll do one more, Vicky.
Yeah, hi. Because of bandwidth issue, I have to keep my camera off. But my question is, this is a very elegant tool. How does one measure progress? Second is that if there is, one is the self-assessment, what the client feels. Second could be what the stakeholders in his ecosystem are going to quantify, okay, in a manner of speaking. But what if still there is a child contamination in the ego, or in the adult? So that's where my thought is right now. So if you can just help me understand this.
Sure. I don't proclaim to be an expert, but I can think along with you, and I also invite anyone else to respond. Your first question was about how do you actually track progress?
Measure, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So I would say, Vicky, that the fact is that this is it starts out as a self-assessment. So while it's co-created, the therapist really gives the client a lot of space to give themselves their own score. What would seem logical to me is that is a philosophy that continues even in the progress of the therapy, which is at different points of time, you would ask the client to reflect. You would ask them to actually see where they are. You might ask them, what is the data? What is the evidence? As a therapist, you could always challenge that. You could also stroke and support that. You could provide further data that you have observed to fill in the gaps. So I would say it's at every stage co-created, much like therapy itself is, but the power should fundamentally lie with the client. That's, I think, also the philosophy of what we practice here in TA, which is it's really about trusting people to have their own resources, be able to think for themselves. So even in measurement, I think we would continue with that sort of approach.
Got it. Thank you. And one other thing I wanted to also, I could resonate very well with what you spoke about the inflamed parent, and particularly when you are dealing with deep-rooted belief systems, which have been, and it's almost sacrilegious, or even, they can't even go there. Are you getting me? Though it is not supporting them in the current context of the world they're living in. So I was able to resonate very strongly with what you said on that part. And that's the skill of the therapist, how you can, support the client in this context. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. And one thing I also want to tell the group is that there's another great article by the Allens, James and Barbara Allen, written in 1972. And they actually outline a hierarchy of permissions because they've conceptualized that not all permissions are equal and some permissions need to be given in advance of other permissions. So according to them, they start out with the permission to be, to exist, being a fundamental permission. And then there's a ladder of about 8 permissions. And the last one is the permission to find and make meaning. So it's a very interesting article. Again, if you guys are interested in permissions, please do read that one as well. Shivani, you want to say something?
I don't know whether it's appropriate, but if I would like to know your opinion on the hierarchy of permissions.
My personal opinion on that is like, well, thank you for asking, because while I said it's an interesting article, I actually found it a little prescriptive. For me, a lot of reading Shivani comes from the perspective of the context in which and the time in which it was written, and then being able to provide a much more contemporary relational lens to it. So a lot of classical TA reading I recommend from that perspective, but certainly not to take it as gospel truth.
Lovely, thank you. I was also thinking there, and I haven't read the article. That's why I checked. Thank you so much.
Great. Okay, I think we can move on, Abhijit. That was a great discussion. Just one slide on telling you what I have learned, and anyone else who's ever used the permission wheel, please chip in. But I think the power of this tool is that it's really intuitive. It's really simple. The fact that it's a visual tool, I think, can engage clients very early on. I have found that with certain clients where early in the process, I'm struggling to build rapport, and it almost becomes like a question and answer session because they're just not open. An exercise like this can really hook their child. So then they get excited and they get involved. It's something that they're initially doing on their own, and then they're also sharing with you. So I have found that it's a way of actually building rapport, apart from also, of course, getting a sense of the person, really understanding how they see themselves. It's holistic, as we discussed, and it gives a lot of power to the client because it is co-created. It's not like a diagnosis that the therapist is doing. It does help in goal setting. I think it's a way where a client can really get an overview of where they're at and what they would like to work on. And then at different points in the therapy, we can draw permission wheels. We can draw it 6 months later, a year later, and see the movement. So it's very helpful from a contracting and a tracking perspective. It's a strengths-based approach, as Abhijit pointed out. And we're not actually aiming for 100% across areas. So one of the analogies used by Laurie Hawkes in her article is that it's not like we're aiming for everyone to be 100% at everything, because that's not even possible. She uses the analogy of a tree, saying that at the end of the day, the roots and the branches, the main trunk, are not going to really change. So, and that's fine, because that's what makes us different as human beings. So to respect that, to respect differences in clients, some areas they may not even want to increase their permissions, and that's fine too. And the nicest thing about this tool, I think, and which in my own article I really utilized a lot, was the permission to be creative with the tool itself. So you don't have to be bound with the 4 quadrants you see. You can really think about other permissions you like to include, leave out the ones you don't think are relevant. So you can really play a lot with this. Yeah. So I wanted to show you all one permission wheel that I drew recently, or rather I had a client, I'm calling her Mia. I had her draw her permission wheel. So I'd love to know, what do you guys, just take a look at her wheel and tell me, what do you notice about my client? What can you tell about this person? What questions would you be curious about? What might you ask her? Do you notice patterns? Do you notice any incongruencies?
My first thought, I'm sorry, I'm jumping without raising my hand, was like, this has to be a be strong person.
I am really surprised that you see that. How did you so intuitively see that? It's absolutely right. She is a bee.
Because I am a be strong, and I would really understand what this is. No fear, take everything in control, cannot trust, yeah, little bit of sadness, can't be, so yeah, I mean, it just intuitively spoke to me. And the moment I saw no fear, I think my first mind went there. And then when I saw the others, it fit in.
Great. Yes, that's right, Shivani. Yes, others, tell me about my client.
Yashodhara, I can't seem to raise it for some reason. So may I?
Of course. Go ahead.
I just want to understand, the exist bit is blank. So does that mean like fear? So that's something strange.
I think that's a very interesting observation. She has a very low, it is blank. She given herself a 3 score. So if you notice, I actually make the clients write down their scores first and then shade it in. She's given herself a very low score on exist. This is where I realized that the term is open to interpretation, because what my understanding is that she may actually have had a sense that she wasn't wanted. Her mother was very unhealthy, and she wasn't supposed to have children. So my client has heard the story of how she wasn't supposed to happen. Okay. But when I asked my client about this, she shared with me that she understood it as don't be. Like it's okay to do, but don't just be. So that's how she interpreted it. And yet, when she heard my interpretation, it really got her thinking about her own right to exist on this planet. And we were able to then talk about her birth story, what it might even have been like for her when she was in the womb. So it opened up a lot of interesting discussion when I saw that as well. Thanks, Sumitra. Sumitra, you're on mute.
Interesting how you interpret even that word. That opens up.
Yeah. Thank you. I see Indranil and maybe then Vicky we can do. Indranil, you'll have to unmute.
So I can see that there are fear and trust issues in the client which are quite strong.
Yeah.
And trust, of course, opens up the question about whether it's general trusting anybody, being scared to trust anyone, or whether it's building a bond of trust with therapist.
Yeah.
Similarly with fear and exist already, you have explained very nicely.
Yeah, I want to address that first one about trust, because I think that's also a very interesting pickup. What I noticed was that she has such a low permission to trust, and yet on the other elements in the bottom left quadrant, which is to do with me and others, they were very high. So she said she has high permission to be a child, which means to be taken care of, right? To be close to others and to belong. So when I asked her about this, I understood that it is only within the context of a very limited set of people, just her immediate family, which is her husband and her son, that she feels this sense of belonging, that she feels this sense of closeness. Otherwise, for her to trust anyone outside of the immediate family is very, very difficult. And that's actually a permission which over time I intend to work with her on. It is connected to her history of having seen a lot of betrayal in her family of origin. So that was also an interesting pickup there. Thanks, Indranil. All right, Vicky.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So what I'm seeing here is a person who is insecure. There is childhood trauma, unhealed trauma, and the strength that is being portrayed is actually a defense mechanism. It's more a coping mechanism because there is a lot of vulnerability inside.
That's actually very accurate, and I'd love to know how you picked up on the vulnerability. Was it from the fear and sadness?
Well, I'm dealing with one such client. So this is very, very symbolic of that. But yes, you're right, because see, if you look at that quadrant where she's talking about me and myself, because there are opposites when I'm finding here. So it's not really a very what should I say? This non-balance is coming out because it's a self-assessment which one is doing, and that's where the cover is blown. Are you getting me?
Yeah.
The manner of speaking.
Yeah.
So this is my very intuitive take on this wheel. So on interpersonal trust, and there are trauma, there are unhealed trauma, and therefore what happens, ma'am, is that her reaction, her response to stress in the present, when it's a high stake situation, particularly, okay, whatever is the client's definition of high stake, the response is anachronistic. It's not, it will come from a child. It will not be consistent. It will not be appropriate to the current context. That's what I'm finding here.
Actually, the first part of what you said was so bang on. defense is actually to present as a very competent person. So if you look at her scores, where she's given herself a 10, those are the
Yeah.
permissions to succeed. Those are the permissions to think, and they are
Yeah.
very high, as opposed to her permissions to feel. So she actually has an overdeveloped parent, and the adult looks like it's very functional, it's in charge, but there is a lot that she's not in touch with. So she's a client who is
Right.
very passive
So,
faced,
yeah.
very low on
So
expression.
one question from a diagnostic standpoint.
Mhm.
Do you see in her a low tolerance to frustration when you meet her?
Not at all, actually.
Not
That
at
was,
all.
yeah, that was the
Okay.
second part which I was saying, that
Okay. Okay.
that is not right. She's a
All
very
right.
high capacity,
Okay.
very high tolerance.
Mm.
Having said that, clearly it is on the verge of bursting over, because that's why she's in therapy. She came in to grieve about her father who had passed away, and her presenting issue was, why don't I feel sad? So there's clearly a lot going on within us, turmoil, which is not present on the surface. So yeah, that's
And
where
what is the attachment style you see here?
I would term it as avoidant.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
but in the context of her relationship with her husband, presents as anxious.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's the
All
most
right.
like.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. This is fascinating for me, guys, and I hope you're also getting something out of this. But we'll just take one last comment from Shivani and then we'll move on. So I want to give you guys a chance to draw your own wheels.
So I mean, obviously you work with the client and you know much more. But when I look at this and I want to corroborate my pick, is that was it difficult for this client to come into, and maybe the permission wheel helped in that way, you know, was there denial? So when some of these things would have been confronted or challenged by you, my guess would be that there would be some kind of a denial to own up to these being coping mechanisms or defense mechanisms.
Yeah, you know, Ashwani, at the beginning of the therapy, I would say a very strong denial of, for example, oh, I'm not really angry or I'm not really sad. But over the period of, I would say the last 3 months, I've seen a shift there, and her thinking is actually helpful there. Because now cognitively, at least she is able to see the logic in what is being discussed. She's able to also say that I'm not able to feel it. So I think that the work ahead with her might lie with getting her much more in touch with her body. Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
Okay. In the interest of time, I'm going to move on. I know, Rutuja, you have your hand raised. So you might want to write your question in chat, and I promise you will come back to it.
Yash, we have just few comments. Can I just read that? So,
okay, Nisha, go ahead.
okay, Jabasan, who says no fear stood out. Chantel, who said I'm seeing incongruence. And Priya, who said that from the wheel, it is evident that she's more content in many other aspects. I want more understanding around her score of 8 to 10 in many aspects.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. Great questions. Chantal, if it's convenient for you to actually write down the incongruence that you saw, it will be personally helpful for me. And Rutuja, like I said, please do write your question down in chat, and Nisha will help me track it. Okay, group. So the next slide is where we get to pause and draw our own wheels. Okay, so we'll take 5 minutes. I will guide you through it. Abhijit, not this. We don't want this slide yet. I will guide you through the process. What I need you to do right now is just have a pen and paper in front of you. So I'm just going to give you 30 seconds to get that ready. I'm hoping that even those of you who aren't able to be on video somehow have access to pen and paper, because this is really fun.
Yes, you want me to present the blank wheel slide for people to see it?
Yeah, good idea. I think that's slide 8 you can show. Okay. Back up. You're going forward.
Sorry.
No problem. Now you're going right to the end. Okay. While Abhijit does that, I'm going to ask you guys to start drawing, and you will be able to see the wheel anyway, but in any case, this is really about you going inward now for a few minutes. So go ahead and draw a big circle on that page. Now you can draw one vertical line and one horizontal line. So you get the 4 quadrants. Top right, just write me and my feelings. Here it is. Bottom right, me and the world. Bottom left, me and others, and top left, me and myself. Okay. So divide each quadrant into 4 sections. Start with the top right and write joy, anger, fear, and sadness, as you see represented here on the screen. Go ahead and write the others in bottom right. Succeed, to think, to know, to grow up. Next is bottom left, child, to be close, belong, trust. Abhijit, you're drawing your own wheel also? Yeah. And then top left, pleasure, self. And then you can again make a subdivision there to write gender. And last 2, health and exist. Permission to be healthy, permission to exist. Okay. Okay, now what you're going to do is you're actually going to intuitively start to give yourself a score. So I do this a little different maybe from what Laurie Hawkes has proposed, but I find this simplest. So just give yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think is your permission for each of these? Okay, to feel and express joy. Do it intuitively. Some people ask me, is it about feeling or expressing? It's okay. Just use your intuition. Joy, permission for anger. What is it? Give yourself scores for each of these. I'm going to give you a minute to do that. So label it on the outside of the wheel against the relevant section.
वही टेबल पे तो रखा था, वो तो देख, टेबल पे तो रखा था.
Take another 30 seconds. Abhijit, can you shift to the next slide? Okay. I just want to show folks that the last step is you're going to just color it in, like you saw in the sample wheel that I showed you for my client Mia. Yeah, so if you have like a 8 on joy, for example, then you'll draw it similar to this one here. This wheel, interestingly, has 10 concentric circles, so you get a sense. It's got 8 out of 10 on joy, maybe 7 out of 10 on anger. So similarly for yourself, just add some color to your wheel. Last 30 seconds. Abhijit, it'd be a good idea to now just take the slides off screen so we can interact.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. before I invite you to share, here are some reflection questions, okay? So I want you to think about and note your responses to each of these. Number one is, how did you feel as you were drawing your wheel? Number two is, as you look at your wheel right now, what emotions and thoughts come up for you? Just note that. Number three is, what surprises you about your wheel? Number four is, what patterns and connections are you able to make? This could be across different quadrants or across different permissions. And here's a final question. Which one permission do you believe if you improved or increased, then all areas of your wheel would be impacted positively? Okay, I know I said it was the last question, but I'm giving myself the permission to throw in one last more. In your journey of TA, what do you think is the permission that has increased most for you? You could be 3 years into training, 1 year, you could have just done TA 101. But what's that one area you suspect you've already begun to impact because of TA?
The last question is such a diploma answer question.
Maybe you can use it. Okay, I think since we're doing
Yes.
quickly.
Someone's asking if you can put the questions on display.
Yeah, I have them on a slide, so I'll give you a minute for that. Abhijit, would you do that? It's the next slide. So 1 more minute, guys, just in case you want to see the questions written down. You can see people really engaging with this. Okay, so I hope that's given you a sense, and I would love to now invite the group to just share what came up for them. And it could be a response to anything, any one of these questions, or an overall response, just quick comments on what you experienced. And
Shall I keep this slide on, or you want to take it off so that
you can remove it all? Thank you. Okay, so we'll just take 5 minutes to talk about our experience. Srinath is still drawing. Hi, Srinath. Okay, I see. Shivani, you want to go first?
I'm not going to answer all the questions, too much time. But I do want to respond. I think that question was very powerful in terms of the one area which would, if you could change, would impact all areas. And I think I got 2, so I'm giving myself permission to extend a little. Was to belong and to be sad. And I think they're also interconnected because as a Be Strong, I am not vulnerable. I don't show my vulnerability, and that kind of also leads to not being sad and then not being close to others. And therefore, a lot of that. So my me and others, the be close, belong, child, trust are also low. And I feel that if that part got taken care of, it would impact quite a lot. I'm going to stop at that. Yeah.
That's such an interesting connection that you connected it to the showing of vulnerability in sadness. Thanks, Shivani. Chantel?
Thank you. My two areas that I think if I improved would be to belong and to be close, which had the lowest scores of all. Oh, and trust, actually, 3 areas. They all had very low scores. And I saw that how TA has improved my life is my understanding of getting rid of the injunction, don't succeed, don't think. So I can see where TA has improved my life, and I'd like to focus now on using it to improve the being close, belonging, and trusting.
Lovely, lovely. So the TA has really helped you with the bottom right quadrant, me and the world.
Yeah.
And the permissions you would now like to focus on are me and others quadrant.
Yeah, because I do everything online, so I don't have to deal with others in reality online. So I'd like to actually get out into the world and try and be close to others and trust others that I'd be safe with them.
Lovely sharing. Thank you. Arpita next, and I see 4 others, so we'll just do it quickly. And I can't see the order yet, but I see Arpita. I'd like Rutuja to go after Arpita, and maybe then Shibani and Java. Yeah, so Arpita.
Even Poonam has raised her hand.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Yes, of course. So Arpita.
So while I was drawing, I was intuitively drawing this, giving myself those numbers in the different quadrants. Yet I was coming across that hesitation when I had to put that number, and I don't know what was happening. There was something I was experiencing. I don't think I had the words to express. So that hesitation is coming up a lot. That while of course I can't express my anger, but I was hesitant to give myself a lower rating. So that was one thing that was coming up for me. And so after this I am in TA Foundation course, and the one permission that I'm giving myself is be myself. So that is that is somewhere I'm working, that accept myself as I am.
Yeah, that's great. And Arpita, you're reminding me of how, as I have grown more and more and learned more and more, for me to value process more than content is so important. So if I were working with a client who was struggling to actually write down the score and feeling hesitation, to me that would be a very interesting exploration. What's going on with you in this moment? What are you experiencing? What might it be? And it's okay that it is, but when we look at it.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Thanks.
Rutuja?
Hello, ma'am. So thank you for the opportunity to talk. The one question that I would like to answer is which one permission that I would like to improve. I don't know if will impact on my other permission, but the one that is the grow up. So I am into my 21 right now, and it always feels to me that adulting is difficult. The more you grow up, the more problems come in front of you, and you have to deal with it. So at that point, it feels like better if I would have been in that child state. The growing up is difficult and handling a lot of things together. And another thing is pattern and connection. So I saw a pattern, the close, trust, and anger. So I am giving low permission for myself to be angry. And there is that, low permission for trust other people and be close to somebody, because obviously there are certain past experiences which are leading to this feeling.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So you are making a connection between your low permission for anger and also then to be close to others.
Yeah, and then trust.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Okay. So nice to hear from someone who's 21, you said, my God. Yeah.
Yeah, I am into my MA psychology. So yes.
Lovely to have you here. And I want to tell you that I'm in my 40s and I still have trouble growing up. So you're not alone.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. So we're going to do Shibani, I think, and then Jaba and then Poonam.
Yes, thanks, Yash. So I found the exercise very vulnerable and moving. I found it a very good tool to connect with myself. And my scores for self and exist are pretty low, which I had an idea because my injunction is high on don't exist. So the pattern that I connected is that if the injunction is high, then the permission obviously becomes low. So I could connect it with the numbers and see it in translating into reality, which is the reverse of each other. And the thing which is moved for me after TA, which I think is beautiful, is that the permission to belong and be close is quite high now, which I'm really cherishing and feeling a lot of joy for. That's moved now in a positive direction. So that's, yeah, it's a very nice exercise for me.
Thank you. Yeah, I love that you're able to celebrate that. I see the joy on your face right now.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Jabba?
Yeah, so I think I got clarity on what I need to give myself permission for. I'm exactly at the other end of the spectrum when somebody like 21-year-old spoke up. I'll be close to 60, so other end of the spectrum really, age-wise. And I realized that I always knew that my biggest problem is lack of belongingness. But somehow I had never been able to connect that, okay, I can give myself that permission. So that was revealing for me. That, okay, no matter what the injunction, no matter what the childhood, no matter what the adulthood, I still have a chance to give myself the permission of belonging, and that will impact all other areas of my life as well. So thank you for this exercise.
Thank you for that share. Such a beautiful share. Yeah. Never too late. And I think if I were working with a client who then really was so clear about their permission area, the next step for us would then be to get into what do you think might help? What actions might they be? Or even what other areas of permissions might help you do that. So it would serve as a great starting point for a discussion.
Thank you. Thank you for that tip.
Poonam?
Yeah, a lot of insights. I'll stick to two. So one is a pleasant surprise, which is my score on belonging was very intuitively 9. And I think I attribute it to TA, the permissive space that it is created for me, right? The other one is pretty shocking for me, and I'm still processing it. I scored myself 2 in health. Yeah. And yeah. Yeah, so I'm thinking of my mother and, yeah, so I think there's a lot of passive behaviors I engage in, which I'm getting in touch with.
It's really impacting you. Huh? You said you were shocked by it.
Yeah.
Thanks for that share, Poonam. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so powerful. All your sharing was very, very powerful for me. Thank you for that, everyone.
Yes, Krish has raised his hand as well, if you have time.
Let's do Krish.
Hi, so I was, having a lot of resistance in creating the wheel. I was thinking that this is good for this client, that client was the thought coming. And I suddenly caught myself, okay, what is this resistance about not wanting to do my wheel? And I did the whole thing, and then I realized that I graded every place excepting the cell. And then I was going back and checking that, knowing about myself, I have less permission about this. That was a very big surprise for me, and that's what I'm relating it to. So I just thought I'd just share that with the group.
Thank you. Thank you for that share, and good on you for noticing the resistance and working with it. Okay, lovely. So now the next part of this presentation, I'm really going to be whizzing through. This is actually where my article starts. Okay, and these were some of the thoughts and contributions that I was encouraged to make by the permission wheel. Okay, so the first thing was I was curious about the process. Like I said, I guess I've always been interested in using my own personal experience and process as I try to integrate TA concepts. So you can see even in my first year, I was looking at in the article including what were some of the permission transactions, the way that I saw them then. Today, 4 years later, I might not agree that it's as linear as this because, like I said, I don't even believe that permission is a single transaction. But it was still interesting that the way the conversation flowed between me and my trainer, as well as me intrapsychically, was this. I drew that there was a parent, there was an adult initial contract in a way with my trainer saying, would you like to write this article? And me responding from my adult, yeah, it'd be a good exercise. Of course, we know that there would have been a lot of ulteriors that would have been going on in that itself, right? With maybe my excitement and feeling validated by the request from somebody I saw as an authority figure, yeah, especially in the beginning of training. Then what kicked in for me was the self-doubt. You see, I had permission to write. I've written a lot of books actually, but then this thought hit me that I've never written for an academic journal. I've not really written an academic article. Would my writing meet those standards? And they are high. For Sajta, they are high. It is a rigorous process. So I was asking myself, it was as if my parent was, chastising my own child, saying, you really think you can do this? And my initial response was, yeah, actually, maybe not, you're right. I haven't done this sort of thing before. So I then went back to my trainer. It was as if I was then looking for that reassurance from her. So it was a parent-child or child-parent transaction again, with me asking, would it really be all right for me to write this as me? And by as me, I meant in my own personal, conversational, light-hearted style, the kind that I use for my books. And her response was a very spontaneous, of course, don't worry about it. Just write it as you. The ulterior was actually be yourself. And then what I found was the fact that she added that it'll be fun, that excitement from her child to my child. I feel that was actually a very powerful part of the process, because that then got me confident again. It got me enthused. It's so unusual to write an article so early in your training. So I was like, yeah, I will do it. Okay. In the next slide, I then wrote down what I at the time considered to be the actual taking in of the permission. Abhijit, if you could switch to the next slide. The theory around this says that taking in permission is actually more important than giving of permission. I think Chantel referred to that earlier when we were starting out. It is really about getting all ego states involved, but the child is very central. So in a way, I feel as though when I was able to go back, and this is obviously an imagined conversation, right? With my child saying to my parent, well, my trainer thinks it's going to be fine and we're going to have fun with this. And my parent responding, I find this very cute that I wrote this, but the parent saying to my child, yeah, you know what you're doing and go ahead and give it a shot. Obviously, in real life, it doesn't work as linearly as this, but I think it illustrates the idea that, first of all, taking in a permission is really on, the onus is on the client. The power is with the client. And also, it needn't be as explicit as we think. Permissions can be verbal, they can be non-verbal. There's a lot going on when we're communicating with each other. So there's part of it about being intrapsychic, the other part of it being non-verbal, and also hard to define. But the theory does say that in permission transactions, all ego states tend to be involved. The ego states of, let's say, the therapist and the client, all of them are involved. But ultimately, it is the child ego state which takes in the permission. The cooperation of the adult of the client is also very important in this process. Shivani, I see you have your hand raised. You want to say something?
Just checking, and this is a thought that came to me, whether the permission coming from the other person, the therapist's child, actually has more potency because it is likely to be accepted easier. Yeah, because it's not coming from a parental, and therefore the earlier discussion that we were having about it becoming a dependency or wanting validation, it kind of negates that whole objection that we had to the first slide, the first transaction we saw.
I think you're really onto something, and I was struggling to remember where I read it, because in my perusal of the permission articles, maybe it's the Keith Tudor 2016 article, but I actually read that there may be more potency when the permission comes from another's child to your own child. Yeah, so it could be to do with just the affect, the emotion, the playfulness involved, but it is, so your intuition is pretty on track there.
Yeah, also because in child-to-child interaction happens, it's like we're doing it together rather than somebody telling you what to do and therefore I'm one down.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. Thanks, Shivani. Okay, so the next part of my article, so the first part was really about examining my own process of writing for Sahajta and the permission transactions. The next part of it was the taking on the encouragement to play with the wheel. So Abhijit, if you could switch the slide. Yeah. See, the thing is that the wheel is very well designed, okay, and we all saw the power of it. But the creator actually said play with the wheel. So there is a possibility that even as you guys were drawing it, you found something missing or you would love to have added something. So how about a little bit of a brainstorm on what possibilities do you see? What are the other life areas which you found missing from the 4 that are already there? And even within those life areas, what are some things that you thought there are possibilities to add? So go ahead and you can raise your hands or just unmute and speak. Abhijit, it might be interesting to show slide 8 again so folks can. The one before this. Thank you. What do you guys think?
How about a spiritual quotient?
Beautiful. Yeah. Who was that? Sumitra, maybe. I don't know. Okay, Poonam,
Yeah, I added couple. Permission to decide, take responsibility. It's a version of thing.
Yeah.
And also permission to shine.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which quadrants would you put permission to decide and take responsibility?
I think it's closer to thinking.
Yeah,
And
the world.
to success. Yeah.
And what was the third one you said, Poonam?
No, just 2. So shine.
Oh, shine.
Shine.
Yeah.
So success is something else, but to really claim place and shine. Yeah.
Intuitively, where would you put that? In which quadrant? If you had to put it in a quadrant.
It's me and myself, actually.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
Not really about success. Success is the world. Yeah.
Intuitively, I might even put it somehow in bottom left. But I think maybe it is me and myself also.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
What about money?
Hi, Meera. Permission to be wealthy. Yeah.
And my relationship with money.
Yeah, absolutely. Reminding me of the money scripts workshops that Aruna has been doing. Yeah, we have a lot of hang-ups about money.
Yeah.
Which quadrant do you think that might go into, Meera?
I think I would put it in me and myself.
Possibly. I'm just thinking me and the world has things like succeed.
Huh.
So, yeah, might also
be, yeah.
But I guess that doesn't matter as much as including something important.
Money, yeah. Relationship with money.
Great. Rutuja?
Yes, ma'am. I felt that in the quadrant of me and my feeling, there could have been that emotion of love, how much permission you're giving yourself to love yourself.
Yeah, such an important one. Thanks, Rutuja. Vicky?
Life purpose, finding meaning in life.
Lovely.
Of course, I was also going to talk, I had the financial freedom in my mind, but the lady just spoke about it. But this was something which came to my mind, the most fundamental thing.
Very nice, to find purpose.
And the meaning, what is the meaning attached to my life?
Yeah, nice.
Thank you.
Jasmine, then we'll do Suja and Jaba.
Yeah, I was thinking of rest. And I don't know, especially for women, rest.
I love that one. Thank you. Suja?
Yeah, I was thinking whether we could include me and my feelings with also me and the world and me and others. Yeah, how my feelings play with the world and with others, apart from me.
Interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have Jaba, and then last one will be Sundar.
So I thought of gratitude and hope.
Lovely. Thank you, Jaba. Sundar?
Yeah. See, I was just thinking, judgment and interpretation. These two are maybe it should come in the me and the world quadrant, because from childhood we start judging. So regardless of which state you come from, whether at that moment of judgment, one could be in parent state or adult state or child state. So I guess I was finding it a bit difficult that it is not there, judgment and interpretation. So that's what I thought I must share with you guys.
Very nice. Thank you. Thanks, Sundar. Okay, that was great, you guys. I'll show you just a quick slide. We won't spend time.
I had something.
Yes, Meera.
I was wondering where would asking for help come?
I think that's an important one. It may be subsumed under this being a child, because the understanding of being a child is also to be taken care of. But you might like to be very explicit, because being a child can also mean to be spontaneous and playful. So that's an important one too. I think that's one many of us with a Be Strong struggle with. So it would be great to make that explicit. I might put it in me and others.
Yes, I was thinking of self-stroking, me and myself.
So nice. For a minute, I thought you were pausing to stroke yourself right now during the presentation. But what you're saying is, you're saying that the very idea of being able to acknowledge myself and stroke myself. Yeah, powerful. Okay, so Jaba, I know you had your hand up. You want to quickly say, and then we'll move on.
No, I had not lowered my hand.
Okay, got it. Super. So we can move to the next slide. And in my article, I had included a sample table of what all, and I had brainstormed these with myself, and I think with the training group. So to feel all feelings, I actually think guilt can appear. It's a very strong racket feeling. It's not necessarily one we want permission for, but it's good, again, to understand where a client is at. In me and myself, stuff like to be beautiful, to relax, to be sexual, to approve of myself, to deal with my problems, to be silly. So I really was taking a lot of liberties, as you can see. But that's the idea of the whole wheel, the whole exercise. In me and others, to have things like to forgive. Okay, I had to love there. I think that's actually a very, very powerful one. To be loved, to express myself, to refuse, to say no. Possibly an underdeveloped one in us, some of us. And then in me, in the world, to be important, something which I think we find a struggle, many of ourselves and our clients. To be different, to stand out, to learn, to grow, to make an impact. So yeah, I mean, the possibilities are endless is the whole point. So that was the point of showing you this and the brainstorming we did. Moving on, the other things that I included in my article was how it was possible to mix and match wheels. Okay, so now I loved the permission wheel, and I had trained as a coach previous to coming into TA, and one of my favorite exercises there was the balance wheel or the life wheel or the coaching wheel, as it's called. So I actually experimented with doing this with a client who I'm calling Raman. What we did was we actually began with his life wheel to identify the areas of focus for him in terms of what his current levels of satisfaction were. So this is a standard wheel. Again, this can also be customized for a particular client. In Raman's case, he really wanted to focus on the area of his career, and his career was in the financial markets. So it was a very interesting exercise when we actually drew out what he thought were the permissions he needed to succeed in his career. Okay, and they included things like the permission to win, the permission to compete, the permission to be disciplined, to stand out, but also the permission to take risks, a very fundamental one. And for him, it was a real aha moment when he realized that his permission to take risks, coming from his very middle class upbringing, where the message of people like us don't take risks, that was actually spilling over from his personal life into his work life, and it was hampering his ability to take risks at work. So it was really a moment where he began to identify what the problem really was, and then he was able to experiment and start taking more risks, and to look at what are the other competencies he would need to build and how he would be able to allow himself to take more risks. So that's one example of how we can just explode any area of a person's lives and then look at relevant permission wheels for that area, right? Shivani?
I had a question. So all the permissions in the cases that you added, saying that we can customize it, I'm wondering how one arrives at those. Is it something that one should allow the client to come up with? And so I'm kind of doubting the client a little bit over here and saying, what if they're not able to think in the way, if they don't have the language that we have and words put it down?
Yeah.
So how have you done it if you've customized it with the client?
I have found I tend to do this when I want to engage the client's child and want to get them to play more. That's one area, that's one time when I do it. I find myself doing it with clients who I do assess as having a high permission to think. Having said that, I would also like to believe that sometimes it might open up a client's thinking, because the use of a visual tool, the use of co-creation, maybe the assistance with some sort of language, these are all possibilities for us. So I wouldn't want to limit it to people who are able to think, who already have a high permission to think.
Yeah. But they're able to come up with things like, I want to give myself the permission to feel sexual or beautiful or spiritual or whatever.
Yeah. It really depends on what kind of client you're working with, but absolutely, these things have come up.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, great. And then, since I was anyway in love with wheels at the time of writing this article, in the next slide, you'll see that I took the 21st century skills permission wheel and created a permission wheel for that. So the 21st century skills are the 4 C's of creativity, communication, critical thinking, and collaboration. It's to do with education and curriculum development and the skills that our kids need, or even we need in the 21st century to succeed. So I conceptualized the idea of a permission wheel wherein within creativity, for example, and I simplified it here, what if there was the permission to innovate or the permission to continuously learn? Similarly, in communication, what would it mean to be authentic and to express yourself? So this was just a sample, and I used a simplified low, medium, high sort of. So you see 3 circles concentric over there. And that I think was an interesting idea. So your reactions to this or any other wheels that are springing to your mind?
Very spontaneously, I put the clap over there because I love the idea of taking, something that they want to work with and creating dimensions and then, fitting in the aspects that are there in the permission wheel into this. Just looking at it.
Great, thank
you.
you.
So much structure.
Yeah.
I'm thinking something like parent wheel.
Parent wheel. Say more. Sorry, someone else is unmuted, so I can't hear Poonam.
No, pretty much like this is 21st century skills wheel. There could be a permissions needed when parenting kind of a wheel.
Oh, nice. I like that. Yeah. What all we need to be a 21st century parent.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Great. So I think the point, and by this time you'll see that my excitement and my build on the original permission wheel was really about just being creative, being spontaneous, pushing boundaries, going anywhere with this and using it in different contexts. And I'm happy to say that over the years, while I don't use this tool with every client, of course, it's not appropriate for all clients at all times, but I have maintained touch with it and used it in different ways. So if you give it a go in your own practice, I think you might find it a very strong tool in your arsenal. Okay, so last couple of slides, guys, and I know we're in the last few minutes also, so I think we're tracking well. Here's where I shared a personal example from my own life. Okay, so what happened was I drew my permission wheel and I showed it to my husband. And sometimes lay people who have no understanding of TA can say very intelligent things. So my husband said, you've given yourself a high permission for anger, but then how come every time you lose your temper, you feel so miserable? Yes, so I pondered about it. I thought it really was a good question. And here are some answers I came up with as a result of that prompt. One was that the permission wheel really, first of all, is about appropriate uses of an emotion. And in many cases at the time, my anger showed up as inappropriate. It wasn't a healthy use of anger. It was maybe shouting or getting loud in my personal context. So that was one dimension. The other one was I realized that I really had a very low permission to make mistakes. So even if I were to slip and lose my temper, it would really impact me. If I were to draw it now, I would include a very high permission for guilt, which I generally consider a racket feeling, although guilt can be functional also. But I think the high permission for guilt also would then contribute to my feeling so miserable and down after losing my temper. Overall, I felt I had to learn to use my anger permission more selectively and more wisely, and increase my own permission to be human and to make mistakes. I also realized another connection, which is that this high anger permission was actually compensating for a very low permission for both fear and sadness. So as I worked on expressing myself at the levels of more vulnerable feelings, then the need to use anger also came down for me. I also realized that I have a very high permission to grow and to learn. So I really was able to educate myself on the healthy uses of anger and on tools for self-regulation, emotional regulation, what emotional maturity in a relationship looks like. So all of these have really helped in terms of making my anger expression much more healthy. My husband is very thankful to TA, by the way. And also interestingly, increasing my permission to be myself, to be a child, to play, to relax, to have fun, to trust others. All of these permissions are some things that I have worked on over a period of time. And I find I do not have to rely on my expression of anger to get what I want. So those have also been helpful. Okay, I'm seeing Vicky's hand up.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. You spoke about inappropriate anger. And I have generally seen that when a client resorts to displacement of anger, okay, as a defense mechanism, there is an immediate guilt that kicks up and making the person very miserable, you know. So I just thought I'll add my 2 bit to that.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think in training, one of the things that our trainer Aruna often said was, the key is how does the expression of that emotion leave the person feeling? Are they actually soothed? If they're not, then that means it's likely a racket feeling and it's an inappropriate expression. So that was useful.
तो कहते हैं ना किसी और का गुस्सा किसी पे.
Correct.
Okay. And the funny thing is, you'll only hit targets who can't hit you back, right?
Not necessarily. Sometimes you want a good fight. Okay, so last couple of slides, guys. So here is, I think this is the part when I reread my article to make this presentation, I was like, my God, I just forgot about this. I proposed it with so much excitement. I wrote in my article that this idea merits further development, and I totally clean forgot about it for so many years. But I conceptualized that there could be the idea of a super permission. And what I meant at the time by super permission, and even now I think of it as something without which the potency of all other permissions is actually just not there. And this could vary from person to person, or it could also be a universal thing. For example, the permission to feel all feelings, the permission to be human. The ones I think I like best are the permission to be myself. And generally, I have found when thinking about a client, the permission to be oneself really does seem to be one that encompasses a lot of other permissions. Equally, they're in therapy to learn something, to accept, but also to grow, change, evolve, experiment. So the permission to change, rather than viewing oneself as a fixed entity, could also be conceptualized as a super permission. I referenced earlier that Allen and Allen in their 1972 article talks about a hierarchy of permissions. And I was also saying that to me looked like it could be a little prescriptive. But to the best of my knowledge, I don't think the idea of a super permission or some really important permissions that encompass other permissions has yet been developed or worked on. So I am interested in rekindling this idea myself. So And if any of you have thoughts or builds about it, please do share with me as well. And the last thing I wanted to show you was I was a 2-month-old trainee. Okay, in the process, of course, some months passed of writing the article, but my trainer Aruna was very surprised that I actually reached out to Laurie Hawkes, who is a therapist. I guess she's in France. She's got about 25 years of experience. It was her article I referenced, and I actually engaged with her. I talked about her article and I sent her mine, and her response to me at the time, I read with so much warmth. This I dug out just yesterday, and I read it with so much warmth, and I realized that here's a therapist who's been at the time working for 25 years in the field of psychotherapy, and she's taken so much interest to read the article, to stroke it, to build on it. And I think that again, the permissive atmosphere in the world of TA is what has done so much to build my own confidence, to build my own belief in my potency as a therapist, and to think and be creative and produce. So at this juncture, I think it's a good time for me to thank you all for participating, to thank Nisha, who was, by the way, my partner from an ops perspective in the writing of the original article. And of course, for Professor Punde, Abhijit, without whom I would not have landed up and made this presentation today. So thank you. And a big shout out to my trainer, Aruna, who encouraged me to write the original article and continues to be a big support and collaborator today. Thanks, everyone. We're at 7:58. I guess we can wrap up with a couple of...
We have a couple of minutes for people to give strokes
right?
Directly. Yeah.
Definitely. I'll take that. So I really loved the entire presentation. And I also liked your style, inviting us to engage and also take this back. What I found amazing was how you brought that coaching point of life, wheel of life, pick up one area like financial, aspect that one wants to improve and create and explode an entire permission wheel on that. That just exploded ideas in my head was raising. So thank you for the inspiration you are, Yash, and lovely again. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Srinath. And I see all my colleagues here, Poonam, Meera, Radhika, Abhijit, all of you have been great supports, and it's lovely to see you here today. Yeah, so last
there are a lot of strokes on the chat as well. Yash, I hope you're reading them.
Yeah, and I hope you'll save the chat for me. Thank you so much. Thank you, Poonam. Thank you, Chantel, Manimaran. See your messages. Ashwini.
Vicky and Indranil have their hands raised. Maybe
Yeah.
Vicky, you want to?
Okay, great. So firstly, thank you. This was a fabulous presentation. And your whole presentation, I can sum up in just one sentence. And that's the last thing that you spoke. The super permission to be oneself, to feel comfortable under my own skin. After all, isn't this one of the core objectives of TA, the autonomy part? And I have realized one thing as a Gestalt therapist also, that when your internal conflicts, you're able to resolve. So, the communication within, as you are within, is the way you are without. So that's where the congruency comes in. So the permission to be oneself, to feel comfortable under your skin, is a sign of line. Thank you, Ms. Lal.
Thank you.
Take a bow, lady.
All right, Indranil.
Thank you, Yashodhara. It was absolutely wonderful and a very, very good presentation. And I really learned a lot. And I'm not a therapist. I'm interested more in TA from the point of view of self-development, personal growth. And I find that this permission wheel is very powerful and very inspiring mechanism. As you said, you can tinker with it, you can play with it, you can create so many things. I have only one small request from you. Is it possible to get your presentation on mail?
Okay, so thank you, Indranil, for that. And I am happy to share my presentation, and I'll be giving a PDF version to Nisha. And Nisha, is that okay?
Yeah.
So you can request it from SATA, and And whoever writes into Nisha, she'll be sending it to you. All right. Thanks, everyone. I learned a lot from you too. Loved your contributions. Thank you so much, Shivani.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Abhijit.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you.
Nisha.
God bless.
Bye.